Salway, Omnates, I am Ruminous, and today we are doing a different video. Instead of doing a gameplay video in itself, we're actually going to go ahead and cheat the game and kind of start Mega Man Legends with all your abilities and all the super special weapons that you can get. And the reason for doing this is to see, can I break the game? What I wanted to see is that because all the lands in this game are connected, I wanted to see if you could use the special weapons to cheat and break the walls and, you know, kind of get to the end areas first and see what would happen. So, here we go. In this game, there are certain barriers that can be broken down with special weapons, the most important being the drill arm. Some barriers can only be broken with the drill arm, which is why I used that throughout the majority of what I was testing and trying to see what I could break the game with. And so, if you use this drill arm to break the area, you can literally start from the very first ruin and get to the very end of the game. And so, I wanted to test what ruins I could actually get into and what the game would allow me to do. For those of you that don't know, when you're making a game, you have something called triggers. Now, triggers are basically what they sound like. It is a trigger. It is an if-then statement. Basically, if the player does this, if they reach this part of the story, if they do this certain action, this will happen. And the reason you put triggers in the game is so that for horror games, you want to have horror elements. So if they reach this part of the corner, that's when the jump scare happens. The trigger happens when they reach a part of the thing. Games can't just be told, oh, just scare the player. You actually have to program it into the game to trigger it, to actually tell the game to do what you want it to do. And so for triggers, this game heavily relies on certain actions or part of the story to be met. And I realized that with the first area, where I tried to go to one of the major, like the last few areas of ruins, and I realized that even though I could get there, it won't actually open any of the doors because you have to reach a certain part of the actual story before that actually happens. So all these areas you can actually get into, but you actually can't do anything before reaching part of the story because none of the doors will work. So these doors are literally just there. No matter how many times you press the button to interact with it or open it, it doesn't work because the trigger hasn't been met. So the game thinks that the game is actually programmed to stop you from doing that. I'm actually quite surprised at this, considering that this game is very linear, so there's no real reason for you to program this like failsafe in there, since there's no reason besides a glitch that you would reach this area. And so if you glitch the game, I mean, you glitch the game. You do what I did, you cheat. So, I mean, why are you stopping me anyway? One of the things I did was to go to these locked areas that were locked behind story elements, not just behind, you know, special weapons, and to see if I could find any artifacts. Sometimes game developers will leave artifacts, they will leave models, they will leave Easter eggs, or just triggers. They will leave actual physical triggers somewhere around the stage that are hidden behind certain things, and I wanted to see if I could find any of them. And although I didn't find any in particular, I did find something very interesting in that the first area there are two Servbots, or Lego Men, what's really what they are. There's no other way to reach these men except to cheat the game, and they also have unique dialogue. It's not uncommon for developers to put in set dressing or extra models or artifacts, you know, to show certain things in the story or to show that the enemies are in a certain area. But it's a little weird that they have particular dialogue for you that you would never see unless you cheat in the game. And particularly, this dialogue tells you that you would never get back to that area, so it seems as if they put that particularly so that for the people like me who would cheat the game, which is, I guess, a little nice Easter egg for me, I guess. Another thing I wanted to test was to actually break the triggers. Some triggers are activated by other triggers. It's kind of like a domino effect. And so I wanted to see if I entered an area before I was supposed to get there, if certain cutscenes would happen, even though other triggers haven't been met. And it seems like a lot of the triggers are activated upon, you know, the very basic thing. And so this door activates the cutscene, even though I haven't met the prerequisites for getting there in itself, so it seems like they didn't plan for every failsafe, just enough of them. At this point, I went and checked the other ruins to see, again, what I could break, and it turns out that every single ruin had the same problem. No matter where you went, you could not enter any doors, except for one, and that was at the very, very end of the game with one of the last Bond bosses. This room you were actually never supposed to go into. This room is supposed to activate a cutscene when you get to the right trigger. However, because you haven't met the right story trigger, it actually lets you into the room, and you actually soft lock yourself in there because there's no way to get out. The door doesn't lead you out of it because, again, you're not supposed to be in here, so they never programmed a way for you to get out. And even when you try to call roll to, you know, use the walkie-talkie to try to get an escape out, she won't let you in there because she's mean. So you're kind of just stuck there until you reset the game. One of the interesting things I found is that only in the water level, if you get there before you're supposed to get there, you arrive in the shark area from the other ruins. And so what happens is that the enemies kind of disappear and reappear upon their own will. You will actually start walking around and they'll just kind of appear and disappear and do all those sorts of things, and your radar will go off and do all whatever, and then all of a sudden you'll turn around and there'll be something just beating you in the face. After trying every permutation of trying to skip certain bosses and areas and whatnot, I kind of resigned myself to failure, as the game is actually designed pretty tightly. There's really nothing you can skip except for one boss, and that is the most annoying one, the ship battle. If you enter into the ruins that are only accessible by the Flutter using the secret pathways, you can actually skip the battle because the Flutter is never there. The Flutter is actually the trigger to initiate this cutscene. And so if the Flutter is not there, you just leave unhindered. You just kind of just leave on your own pace. However, if you decide to bring the Flutter back to the ruin and leave through the same exit instead of the secret pathways, you will initiate the cutscene and the battle. The last thing that I wanted to check was the items. Since I had cheated and got every item, every special weapon, and everything in the game, I wanted to see that if you picked up certain items in the chest, because I didn't unlock those, if that would affect the game. It turns out, no, it actually doesn't do anything. I was wondering if it would glitch out and give me two of the same item. No, it doesn't do anything. It really just, it goes through the motions again. It will activate the cutscenes with roll, making the items, or doing certain things, but it actually doesn't really do anything. There's no other copies that show up in your inventory, and that's really just it, unfortunately. Alright guys, that's gonna do it for me. Unfortunately, this didn't really have as many secrets or Easter eggs or glitches that I could find. I was really hoping for a little bit more, but it turns out they tightly packed this game. They really prepared all the triggers to be met with the proper scenarios. But I still did find a few interesting things, particularly that you could skip one of the boss battles and those extra Lego men that you would, again, never see in any other way. I know this was a little bit unusual, and although I don't really plan to make another video like this soon or really ever again, there is another channel that goes over stuff like this, and that is called She Says. If you like this kind of content, I highly suggest you go over to his videos, and he will go over specifically a lot of games, both that are very well known and some that are a little more obscure. He goes over camera tricks, he goes over certain models, he goes over a lot of things, the same things that I went over in a lot of different video games. So if you like this type of content, please go to him and support him. I know it's a little bit weird, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified of future videos. But until next time, Wale te omnes.